On his birthday, a solitary chaebol is publicly humiliated when he fails to secure a table at a luxury restaurant. Desolate, he witnesses the resilience of a single mother who, amidst her own pain, offers him an unexpected gesture of pure empathy, igniting a flame of hope. The polished glass door of Le Ciel closed with a muffled click, sealing Kim Min-jun's humiliation within the chilling silence of the Seoul night. The cold January air wasn't as biting as the rejection he had just suffered. On his birthday, the man who owned empires, who moved markets with a nod, was just another unwanted stranger. He had no reservation. He had no place. Min-jun walked aimlessly, his expensive leather shoes echoing solitarily on the pavement. The glittering skyscrapers seemed to mock him, their bright lights highlighting the darkness in his own chest. Where would he go? To his empty penthouse, where the panoramic view only accentuated the vastness of his solitude? The irony was cruel. He had everything, but nothing that truly mattered. His steps led him away from the ostentatious glow of Gangnam to an older neighborhood, where the smell of hot oil and spices wafted through the air, mingling with the steam from street stalls. A cacophony of voices, laughter, and clinking cutlery replaced the oppressive silence that followed him. He stopped in front of a small pojangmacha, a street tent lit by yellowish lamps, which seemed like a beacon in his darkness. Inside, the movement was incessant. A woman, her hair pulled back in a tight bun and a stained apron, washed dishes with a silent fierceness. It was Park Ji-woo. Her arms moved at an exhausting pace, the hot water and soap seeming to be the only things keeping her warm on the cold night. Min-jun watched her, invisible in the street's dim light, a stark contrast to the world of luxury he had just left. Ji-woo sighed, an almost inaudible sound as she picked up the phone vibrating in her pocket. "Yes, Dr. Lee, I understand." "What? More? But I already paid the last one. Please, can't it wait a little longer? My son, yes, he's better, but the bills?" Her voice was a desperate whisper, laden with a pain Min-jun recognized. It was the pain of helplessness, of fighting an unyielding tide. She hung up, her shoulders slumping slightly, but she quickly composed herself. There was no time for despair. A customer, a corpulent man with a red face, banged on the table. "Hey, where's my kimchi? It's taking forever, and these plates aren't clean enough." Ji-woo turned, a forced smile plastered on her tired face. "My apologies, sir. I'll bring more kimchi immediately and replace your plate. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience." She took the plate from the customer's hands with a dignity that Min-jun found surprising. There was no anger in her eyes, just an exhausted resilience. She washed the plate again with even more vigor and brought the extra kimchi, bowing slightly. The customer grumbled but accepted. Ji-woo returned to her sink, her lips pressed into a thin line. Min-jun, from his observation post, felt a pang. He, who had never known scarcity or the humiliation of manual labor, saw in her a silent strength that shamed him. She was fighting for something real, something he, with all his wealth, couldn't buy, survival and hope for her son. As Ji-woo dried her hands, her eyes swept the street. They met Min-jun's. He expected a look of curiosity, perhaps disdain for the well-dressed man standing there. Instead, she saw the sadness in his eyes, his hunched posture, the solitude that enveloped him like a cloak. She saw the pain, and she recognized it. Without hesitation, Ji-woo picked up a steaming bowl of eomuk guk, fish cake soup, and a pair of chopsticks. She approached the entrance of the tent, extending the bowl to him. "It's cold out there. You look lost. Please, accept it. It's on the house." Min-jun looked at the simple bowl, at the steam rising and warming the air, and at the gentle, tired smile on her face. It wasn't a smile of pity, but of pure empathy. A sign. He wasn't alone. In that moment, in the middle of the cold street, With a bowl of warm soup in his hands and the kindness of a stranger, Kim Min-jun felt a flame ignite in his chest, something money had never been able to buy. Min-jun looked at the steaming bowl in his hands, the warmth spreading through his numb fingers. The comforting smell of fish broth and radish wafted up to him, an aroma so different from the pretentious perfume of Le Ciel. He raised his eyes to Ji-woo. Her smile was tired but genuine, devoid of the polished falsity he found in his world. It was a smile that asked for nothing in return, only offered. "Thank you," he managed to murmur, his voice a little hoarse with emotion and cold. He couldn't remember the last time someone had offered him something without an ulterior motive, much less on his birthday. Ji-woo simply nodded, her eyes fixed on his for an instant, as if searching for something, before turning to attend to another customer who had just arrived. She didn't wait for effusive thanks, nor for an explanation. She simply gave. Min-jun brought the bowl to his lips. The broth was simple, but incredibly flavorful, warming him from the inside out. Each sip was a stark contrast to the emptiness he had felt moments before. He ate slowly, savoring not just the soup, but the gesture behind it. He watched Ji-woo as she moved between tables, cleaning, serving, always with that forced smile for customers, but with an unwavering dignity. He had seen her humiliated, overwhelmed, but she didn't bend. She composed herself and moved forward. The image of her, with her shoulders slumped after the call about the debt, and then the way she straightened up to face the rude customer, was etched in his mind. He, Kim Min-jun, had the power to resolve her debt with a snap of his fingers, to buy the entire restaurant, to make that customer bow. But she asked for nothing. She just worked, struggled, and yet found space in her heart to offer kindness to a stranger. "Are you feeling better?" Ji-woo's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She was back at the entrance, drying her hands on her apron. Her eyes, though tired, carried sincere concern. Min-jun nodded, placing the empty bowl on the makeshift counter. "Much better. The soup was delicious. How much do I owe you?" He pulled out his wallet, but she shook her head. "No need. It's on the house," I said. She smiled again, a smile that reached her eyes, if only for a brief moment. "I hope you find what you're looking for." "What you're looking for," echoed in his mind. He wasn't looking for a table at a luxury restaurant. He was looking for something he couldn't name, and perhaps, just perhaps, he had found a glimpse of it there, at the street stall. He looked at her, at the simplicity of her existence, at the silent strength that radiated from her. She was fighting for her son, for her survival, and yet she had the capacity to see the pain in a stranger and offer comfort. Her dignity, her resilience were like a beacon. Min-jun felt a new determination form within him. It wasn't pity, nor empty charity. It was a deep desire to protect that dignity, to alleviate the burden she carried. He had the power, the money, the influence. He could be the guardian she needed, without her knowing, without her feeling indebted. He didn't want to steal her independence, but rather to create a shield for her. "Thank you, Park Ji-woo," he said, using her name, which he had heard during the call. She seemed surprised that he knew. I won't forget your kindness." He turned to leave, but stopped. "Where's the restroom?" he asked, a quick excuse to gain a few more seconds, to observe, to absorb. He needed a plan. Ji-woo pointed behind the tent. "It's over there on the side street, but it's a bit rustic." Min-jun nodded and headed where she indicated. As he passed, he took out his phone and discreetly took a few photos of the Pojangmacha's facade, the street, the details. He needed information. He needed a starting point. When he came out of the restroom, Ji-woo was busy with another customer. He watched her once more, the single mother who, with a simple dish and a kind smile, had ignited a flame in his solitary heart. He knew what he had to do. He wouldn't let her fight alone. He would be her guardian, respectful and invisible, until the right moment arrived. With a final glance at the illuminated tent, Min-jun walked away, the cold of the night no longer bothering him so much. On his birthday, he had found a purpose. Min-jun walked away from the Pojangmacha, the cold of the soul night still present, but now softened by a strange and unexpected flame in his chest. The smell of hot oil and spices slowly faded, replaced by the cleaner, colder air of the less busy streets. He no longer felt the weight of Le Ciel's humiliation, nor the vastness of his solitude. Instead, an unusual clarity enveloped him. He walked towards his car, which his driver, Mr. L, must have already discreetly positioned a few blocks away, as was his custom. His steps were now firm, decisive. The warm bowl of soup and Park Ji-woo's tired smile had done more for him than years of therapy, or all his possessions could have. She had seen him, not as the chaebol Kim Min-jun, but as a lost man, and had offered him what he needed most, a sign of humanity. As he entered the luxurious, heated interior of his black sedan, the contrast with the street stall was stark. Mr. Han, a man of few words, merely glanced in the rearview mirror. "Home, sir?" Min-jun shook his head. "No, Mr. Han. To headquarters. And I need you to connect me with the head of security, Lee Jin-woo, immediately, and prepare the meeting room on the 20th floor. I need access to all the company's research and intelligence resources." Mr. Han didn't question him. He simply nodded and picked up the phone. Min-jun leaned his head back against the leather seat, closing his eyes for a moment. The image of Ji-woo, struggling with hospital debt, facing the rude customer with a forced smile, and then extending the bowl of soup to him, replayed in his mind. She asked for nothing but gave everything, and he who had everything couldn't give anything of himself. Until now. "Mr. Lee is on the line, sir," Mr. Han announced, extending the phone. "Jin-woo," Min-jun began, his voice now imbued with authority, but also with an urgency his head of security rarely heard. "I need information, discreetly, extremely discreetly. At your command, sir." Lee Jin-woo's voice was professional and efficient. "There's a Pojangmacha at... Note down the address I'll give you. It's a street tent. I need everything about the woman who works there, Park Ji-woo. Her background, her financial situation, her son's health condition, the hospital where he's being treated, the debts, everything. And also about the owner of the tent. I want to know if she's the owner or an employee." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Sir, with all due respect, this seems unusual." "It's none of your concern, Jin-woo. Just do it, and I want it done without her noticing. No shadows, no direct questions. Use the most indirect channels possible. I want a full report in 24 hours. "Understood, sir. It will be done." Min-jun hung up, feeling a surge of energy. He wasn't acting on impulse. The decision to become Ji-woo's guardian had solidified the moment he tasted that soup. It wasn't charity. It was a recognition of his own failure to find meaning, and the discovery of a dignity he wanted to protect. He didn't want to steal her independence, but rather to alleviate the burden that prevented her from breathing. He wanted to be the invisible shield that would allow her to fight on fairer terms. Arriving at the company headquarters, the imposing building seemed more like a sanctuary than a prison. The meeting room on the 20th floor, with its giant screens and state-of-the-art communication systems, was ready. Min-jun sat at the head of the table, the photos he had taken of the Pojangmacha on his phone. He studied them, every detail of the tent, the street, trying to absorb as much context as possible. He knew the path would be delicate. Ji-woo was proud. Any direct help would likely be rejected. He needed to be subtle, almost imperceptible. He would use his power not to dominate her, but to create opportunities, to remove obstacles she shouldn't have to face alone. That night on his birthday, Kim Min-jun was no longer alone. He had a purpose, and for the first time in a long time, he felt he was in control of something that truly mattered. He wasn't just moving markets, he was about to move mountains, silently, for a woman who had given him a bowl of soup and a kind smile. Min-jun sat at the head of the meeting table on the 20th floor, the glow of the giant screens reflecting in his eyes. The photos he had taken of the Pojangmacha were enlarged on one of the screens, each pixel revealing the simplicity and resilience of the place. He observed the worn tarp, the modest utensils, the makeshift counter where Ji-woo had served his soup. It wasn't just a workplace, it was the stage of her dignity. He closed his eyes for an instant, the image of Ji-woo's tired but genuine smile etched in his mind. She didn't know it, but that simple gesture had been a catalyst. He, Kim Min-jun, the man who moved markets and controlled empires, had been reduced to his most vulnerable essence, and she, a dishwasher, had rescued him. "Sir, Lee Jin-woo's preliminary report will be ready in a few hours." Mr. Han's voice echoed through the room's communication system. Min-jun opened his eyes. "Excellent. As soon as it's ready, I want you to call me. No one else should have access to this data, Mr. Han. No one." "Understood, sir." Discretion was paramount. He didn't want Ji-woo to feel invaded, nor for his help to be perceived as charity. He wanted to be a shield, not a hand pulling her out of her own struggle. Her independence, the strength of her spirit, were the qualities that had attracted him. He wouldn't crush them. His plan needed to be multifaceted, almost an intelligence operation. The hospital debt was the most immediate urgency, how to pay it without her knowing. An anonymous donation to the hospital, perhaps, directed to a fund for patient assistance in specific situations, or a scholarship for her son, which would magically cover medical expenses as an additional benefit. He needed a facade, a credible story that wouldn't raise suspicions. Then, the Pojangmacha. It was her livelihood. Improving working conditions, perhaps even the location itself, could alleviate her burden. He could buy the land where the tent stood or the adjacent building and offer her a symbolic rent or even a concession of use under the pretext of an area revitalization project. Again, subtlety was key. He couldn't just show up and offer a new restaurant. Min-jun began scribbling notes on a tablet, creating a complex diagram of actions and countermeasures. He thought of his legal team, his accountants, his public relations specialists. Each of them would be a piece on the board, moved with precision to achieve his goal without revealing the master behind the curtains. The night wore on. The silence of the meeting room was broken only by the faint hum of equipment and the sound of his own thoughts. He felt strangely alive. The solitude that had accompanied him for so many years seemed to have receded, replaced by a sense of purpose that was both heavy and stimulating. He wasn't just planning a business strategy, he was orchestrating an intervention in a person's life, an intervention he hoped would free her, not imprison her. He didn't want to be her savior, but her silent guardian. The tablet screen flashed with a notification. Lee Jin-woo's report was ready. Min-jun felt a pang of anxiety and excitement. It was the first concrete step. He was about to delve into Park Ji-woo's life, not as an observer, but as an invisible force. Determined to change her destiny, he took a deep breath, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Mr. Han, please send the report to the main screen. And please, prepare some strong coffee. It's going to be a long night." The journey to become Park Ji-woo's guardian was just beginning, and Kim Min-jun was more than ready. He had a purpose, and that was more valuable than any fortune. Mr. Han nodded, his discreet figure moving efficiently. In seconds, the giant screen in the center of the meeting room came to life, displaying a series of documents and data. Min-jun felt a tightness in his chest as he saw the name Park Ji-woo at the top, followed by a low-resolution photograph that nonetheless captured the essence of her tired but dignified face. He began to read, absorbing every detail. Name: Park Ji-woo. Age: 32. Marital status: Ane, single, widowed and children. Park Jun-seo, 7 years old. Address: small rented apartment in Gwanak-gu. Occupation: dishwasher and kitchen assistant at Street Flavor, Pojangmacha. Pojangmacha owner: Kim Dae-ho. Ji-woo is an employee. Min-jun's eyes fixed on the financial and medical situation section. Debts: accumulated hospital debt, approximately W35,000, about 26 Grundrun, related to his son's ongoing treatment. Other debts: W10 Drun, about 7,500 to cover basic expenses and medications. Overdue rent: 2 months. Son's health condition: Park Jun-seo. Diagnosis: acute lymphoblastic leukemia, ALL. Hospital: Seoul University Medical Center. Treatment: continuous chemotherapy, with bone marrow transplant needed in the near future. Guarded prognosis without the transplant. Estimated transplant costs: W100, 00, about $75,000. Min-jun felt the air thin in his lungs. 35 million won in debt, plus 100 million for a transplant. It was a death sentence for a single mother earning minimum wage. The image of Ji-woo, with her kind smile and chapped hands, fighting against this mountain of despair, hit him with overwhelming force. He had complained about a table at a luxury restaurant while she was fighting for her son's life. Anger bubbled within him, not for Ji-woo, but for the injustice of the world. He, who could buy an entire hospital if he wished, sat there, powerless, while a child suffered and a mother exhausted herself. Pojangmacha owner Kim Dae-ho, Min-jun murmured, his voice hoarse. What's his situation? The report detailed that Kim Dae-ho was a middle-aged man with his own set of financial difficulties, barely keeping the business afloat. He paid Ji-woo the minimum possible, but treated her with respect, aware of her situation. The Pojangmacha operated on rented land, with the contract set to expire in 6 months. Min-jun closed his eyes, massaging his temples. The complexity of the situation was greater than he had imagined. He couldn't simply dump money into her account. She was proud, and if he paid the debts, the hospital or creditors might raise questions, exposing her to unwanted inquiries. Mr. Han, Min-jun said, opening his eyes and staring at the screen with new intensity. Connect me with Dr. Lee, the head of our corporate philanthropy department, and also with Ms. Choi from the legal team. Mr. Han executed the orders. In a few minutes, the faces of the 2 executives appeared on smaller screens, each looking somewhat surprised to be summoned at this hour of the morning. Good morning, Dr. Lee, Ms. Choi, Min-jun began, his voice calm but with unquestionable authority. I have a project for you, a project of extreme sensitivity and confidentiality. Dr. Lee, I want you to create a new medical assistance fund, a fund for children with chronic diseases, specifically leukemia. It must be launched immediately, with a substantial initial donation from the company. I want it to be a fund that works directly with hospitals to identify cases of urgent need and cover treatment expenses, including transplants. Dr. Lee, a serious-faced man with thin glasses, nodded. Understood, sir. What is the scope of the initial donation? 100 billion won, Min-jun declared. Dr. Lee blinked but didn't question it. And I want the first identified beneficiary to be Park Jun-seo at Seoul University Medical Center. Make it appear as a random selection based on criteria of need and eligibility. No connection to the company should be made. The family should not know where the money came from, only that it was approved by the fund. Min-jun then turned to Ms. Choi, the chief lawyer, a shrewd and perceptive woman. Ms. Choi, I need you to investigate the situation of the land where the street flavor, Pojangmacha, operates. The address is in the report. I want you to negotiate the purchase of the land or the adjacent building, if it's more strategic, discreetly, under the pretext of an area revitalization project. Once we have control, I want you to prepare a lease or concession of use agreement for the current owner, Kim Dae-ho, with extremely favorable terms, ensuring that the Pojangmacha can continue operating without interruptions, and that its employees, especially Park Ji-woo, have improved working conditions and fair wages. And if possible, that the contract includes a structural improvement clause for the Pojangmacha. Ms. Choi took notes. Her eyes narrowed. Sir, this is quite a specific project for a single location. It's a pilot project, Min Jun replied without wavering. I want to see the effectiveness of our philanthropy and our small-scale community investments before expanding. And above all, I want all of this done without raising suspicions. No one, absolutely no one, should connect these actions to Park Ji-woo or to me personally. Understood. Both nodded, the seriousness of the task evident on their faces. Excellent. Start immediately. I want progress reports every 6 hours. Min Jun ended the call, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders, but another, even greater, settle. The journey would be long and full of pitfalls, but he was determined. He wasn't just moving mountains, he was building an invisible bridge for Ji-woo, a bridge that would take her from the edge of the abyss to a place of safety and hope. He would be her guardian, a silent shield, and would do everything in his power to ensure she and her son could breathe again. The night was still long, but the purpose that guided him was brighter than any rising sun. Min Jun leaned back in the leather chair, the silence of the meeting room once again enveloping him, but now with a new resonance. Adrenaline still pulsed through his veins, mixed with deep exhaustion. It was almost 4 in the morning. He had unleashed a task force that, to the outside world, would be just another philanthropic initiative and a strategic real estate investment by K Group. But for him, it was the first cornerstone of a sanctuary for Ji-woo and Junseo. Mr. Han, he called, his voice a little softer now. Please ensure that Dr. Lee and Ms. Choi have all the necessary support and that their teams understand the absolute urgency and confidentiality. Any leak, any connection, will be unacceptable. Understood, sir. I have already sent the security and confidentiality guidelines to the departments involved. They will be closely monitored. Mr. Han, always a step ahead, had already anticipated the order. Min Jun nodded, closing his eyes for a moment. He could visualize Dr. Lee, a methodical and principled man, already delving into the details of the fund's creation. Bureaucracy would be a challenge, but K Group had the capacity to accelerate processes like no other. The fund needed to be established with impeccable legitimacy, with a diverse board of directors and clear selection criteria, so that Junseo's choice would appear organic and fair. The 100 billion won check would be a powerful catalyst, attracting positive attention and, crucially, deflecting any suspicion about the true initial purpose. Meanwhile, Ms. Choi, with her sharp mind and network of contacts in the real estate and legal sectors, would already be devising the best strategy to acquire the Pojangmacha land. Min Jun knew she was relentless in negotiations, but he had made it clear that discretion and the absence of conflicts were more important than the price. The goal was not to profit, but to protect. Buying the land, or an adjacent building that would allow for strategic expansion or relocation, would give him control over Ji-woo's work environment without her realizing it. He opened his eyes and looked at the screen, where Ji-woo's report was still minimized. The image of Junseo, a 7-year-old boy with a fragile but hopeful smile, was etched in his mind. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, bone marrow transplant, The words were a constant reminder of the race against time. "Mr. Han, what is the average time for establishing a charity fund and approving a first beneficiary in urgent cases?" Min-jun asked, his voice laden with contained anxiety. "With K-Group's structure and resources, and given the urgency you've imposed, Dr. Lee could have the fund operational and the first cases under review within a week. The approval of a specific beneficiary, like Park Jun-seo, could be accelerated to 2 or 3 days after the official launch of the fund, provided all medical documents are supplied and criteria are met." 2 or 3 days. It was a relief, but it still seemed like an eternity for a child who needed a transplant. And the land acquisition? Ms. Choi is very efficient. If the owner is willing to sell and there are no legal complications, we could have a preliminary agreement in 2 weeks. Finalization could take 1 to 2 months, depending on complexity. Min-jun nodded, absorbing the timelines. He couldn't rush things too much without raising red flags. Subtlety was the armor of his plan. He stood up and walked to the panoramic window, watching the city of Seoul begin to awaken under the first rays of sun. The vastness of the metropolis seemed a stark contrast to Park Ji-woo's small life, but he was determined to do his part to alleviate her burden. He wasn't a savior. He didn't want to be. He was a guardian, an invisible shield, moving the pieces of a complex game so that she could have the chance to fight for herself and her son without the overwhelming oppression of debt and illness. The journey would be long, and he knew there would be obstacles. But for the first time in a long time, Kim Min-jun felt that his power and fortune had a real purpose, a purpose that transcended profits and prestige. He was building a new foundation for Ji-woo's life, a foundation of hope, brick by brick, in complete discretion. And that was the greatest reward he could wish for. The following days were a mix of exhaustive routine and palpable tension for Kim Min-jun. He slept only a few hours, but woke with a mental clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. Every meeting, every business decision was now filtered through a new purpose. His office, once a sanctuary of solitary power, transformed into a center of silent operations. He received daily updates from Mr. Han. Dr. Lee was working tirelessly to finalize the legal structure of the fund, provisionally named Children's Hope Fund, with the goal of launching it publicly in less than a week. Miss Choi, in turn, had already begun discreet inquiries about the Pojangmacha land. The complexity of acquiring commercial property in a busy area of Seoul was considerable, but Ms. Choi was a master of veiled negotiations. Min-jun, however, couldn't be content with just reports. The image of Jun-seo, his fragile smile, haunted his thoughts. The need to see Ji-woo, to be sure she was well, even from afar, became an irresistible impulse. One evening, after an endless day of meetings, he drove his car, a discreet model he rarely used, to the Pojangmacha street. He parked at a safe distance, in a dark alley, and observed. The stall was busy, steam rising from the pots, the murmur of conversations and the clinking of dishes. He saw her. Ji-woo was there, washing dishes with almost robotic efficiency, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, a few loose strands framing a tired face. A visibly intoxicated customer began to complain loudly about the food. Ji-woo, with the patience Min-jun had already witnessed, bowed slightly and apologized, offering to replace the dish. The scene wrung Min-jun's heart. The dignity with which she endured the humiliation, the resilience in her eyes, even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. He wanted to intervene, wanted to shout at the man to stop, but he restrained himself. His role was to be a shield, not a visible sword. He stayed there for almost an hour, watching her. Every movement she made, every forced smile for a customer, every moment she seemed lost in thought, probably about Jun-seo. The urgency of his plan intensified. He needed to accelerate, but with the caution of a surgeon. Returning home, the luxurious apartment seemed emptier than ever. He sat in his armchair, his gaze fixed on the sleeping city. The fund would be launched soon. Jun Seo's documents would be the first to be analyzed. Ms. Choi was working on the acquisition. "It's still not enough," he murmured into the void. "I need to do more. I need to ensure she doesn't lose hope." He knew that the real battle was not just against illness or debt, but against despair. And he was determined not to let Ji-woo and Jun Seo lose that fight. The wait was agonizing, but he trusted his plan and his team. The foundation of hope was being built, brick by brick, in complete discretion, and with each passing day, Min-jun felt he was one step closer to fulfilling his silent promise. The days that followed that night of observation were a whirlwind of activity for Min-jun, but the feeling that it still wasn't enough persisted, a constant echo in his mind. He had planted the seeds, but the harvest of hope depended on Ji-woo accepting the help, without knowing that he was the one offering it. The Children's Hope Fund was launched with pomp and circumstance, exactly as Min-jun had orchestrated. A carefully choreographed press conference, led by Dr. Lee, announced K-Group's philanthropic initiative aimed at supporting children with serious illnesses and their families. The 100 billion won check, the initial catalyst, was displayed in all the news, attracting widespread praise and attention. The media highlighted K-Group's humanitarian vision, and the fund was immediately inundated with additional donations and, crucially, with requests for help. Min-jun observed everything from afar, a shadowy figure in his office, as Mr. Han brought him reports. Dr. Lee confirmed that the number of applications is overwhelming, sir. But the team is working to process everything with maximum efficiency. "And the criteria?" Min-jun asked, his voice tense. "Are they clear enough for cases like Jun Seo's to stand out?" "Without raising suspicions." "Yes, sir. The criteria were developed to prioritize medical urgency and the family's socio-economic situation. Park Jun-seo's case fits perfectly, without the need for any direct intervention." Mr. Han knew what Min-jun really wanted to hear. Meanwhile, Ms. Choi had made significant progress in acquiring the Pojangmacha land. "The owner is an elderly man, sir," she reported by phone. "He is reluctant to sell, as the business has been in the family for decades. However, his health is not the best, and his children have no interest in continuing. I offered a price considerably above market value, and he is considering it. I believe we will soon have a preliminary agreement." Min-jun felt a momentary relief. The fund was active. The land was almost secured. But the most important piece of the puzzle was still missing. Ji-woo needed to apply. He couldn't force her. One evening, while dining alone in his apartment, he turned on the television. A local news program was featuring a report on the Children's Hope Fund. The reporter was interviewing a mother who had just had her application approved. Her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Min-jun imagined Ji-woo watching it, perhaps on a small television at the Pojangmacha or in her modest apartment. He hoped the news would spark a glimmer of hope in her, a permission to dream of a better future for Jun Seo, and the spark ignited. The next day, Mr. Han entered Min-jun's office with a discreet smile. "Sir, we received a new application for the Children's Hope Fund, Park Jun Seo." Min-jun felt a lump in his throat dissolve. A wave of emotion hit him, a mix of relief and strange euphoria. He took the folder Mr. Han handed him. There it was, the form filled out in Ji-woo's careful handwriting, the attached medical documents, Jun Seo's detailed story, the pain of leukemia, the urgency of the transplant, the overwhelming debt. He already knew everything, but seeing her words, the hope contained in each line, was different. "Accelerate the review process, Mr. Han," Min-jun said, his voice firm, but with barely contained emotion. "Ensure that the approval is the first to be announced publicly, and that the communication is done with the utmost sensitivity." "Understood, sir. Dr. Lee is already aware of the priority." Minjun looked at Junseo's photo in the report, the same fragile but hopeful smile. Now, hope had a path. He wasn't a savior but a guardian, and his invisible shield was beginning to work. The foundation of hope was being built, brick by brick, and with each passing day, Minjun felt he was one step closer to fulfilling his silent promise. He knew the journey would still be long, but for the first time, he felt that the solitude of his power had found a purpose that transcended money and social position, and that was, in some way, connecting him to a life he never imagined possible. The wave of emotion that hit Minjun upon seeing Junseo's application was a vivid reminder that, despite all his power and control, hope was a fragile element, dependent on the faith of someone like Jiwoo. He held the folder, feeling the weight of responsibility and the silent promise. "Sir, the analysis team is already aware of the urgency," Mr. Han reiterated, sensing the depth of the moment for his boss. Dr. Lee suggested that to maintain the fund's impartiality and credibility, the initial communication be made by a social counselor, followed by a formal meeting to detail the support. Minjun nodded, his mind already processing the next steps. Excellent. Ensure the counselor is someone with tact and empathy, and that the news is delivered personally, if possible. We don't want her to receive this over the phone, like a number on a list. He wanted Jiwoo to feel dignity in every step of the process. In the following days, the well-oiled machine of the Children's Hope Fund worked with remarkable efficiency. Junseo's case, with its medical urgency and the family's precarious financial situation, naturally stood out. The approval was swift but meticulous. Minjun, from his office, received hourly updates, an unusual anxiety gnawing at him. He imagined Jiwoo still washing dishes with the weight of the world on her shoulders, unaware that help was on its way. Finally, the call was made, not by Minjun, but by a social counselor from the fund, a kind and experienced woman, who explained to Jiwoo that Junseo's application had been approved. At first, Jiwoo thought it was a mistake, a cruel joke. Approved? But how? Her voice barely came out, choked with disbelief. The counselor patiently explained the details. The fund would fully cover the costs of the bone marrow transplant, post-operative medication, and even offer assistance for living expenses during the intensive treatment period. It was as if the sky had opened up. Jiwoo, who had grown accustomed to the idea of fighting alone, felt her legs weaken. Tears streamed down her face, not of sadness, but of an overwhelming relief that almost suffocated her. She could barely speak, only muttering, thank you," repeatedly. Mr. Han, who had arranged for a discreet report on Jiwoo's reaction, informed Minjun. "Sir, Ms. Park received the news. It seems she was quite emotional. The counselor reported that she cried with relief." Minjun closed his eyes for an instant, feeling a lump in his throat. It wasn't the euphoria he expected, but a deep and calm satisfaction. It was confirmation that his invisible shield was working. He wasn't saving her, but giving her the tools to fight, to have hope. Meanwhile, Ms. Choi finally delivered the news Minjun expected about the Pojangmacha land. "The owner accepted the offer, sir. The paperwork is being finalized. The acquisition will be completed in less than a week. He was very pleased with the price and the guarantee that the location will be well cared for." "Excellent, Ms. Choi," Minjun replied, his voice firm. "Keep me updated on every detail and ensure the transition is as smooth as possible for the current tenants." He didn't want Jiwoo to feel any instability or threat. With the fund's approval and the land acquisition almost complete, Minjun felt that the pieces of his complex game were finally falling into place. He knew the next step would be the most delicate: how to offer Jiwoo a new beginning, a new location for her Pojangmacha. Without revealing his identity or making her feel indebted, He wanted her to accept the opportunity as a merit of her own hard work and resilience, not as charity. That night, Minjun drove back to the Pojangmacha street. He parked in the same dark alley, observing from afar. The stall was busier than ever, but there was a subtle difference. Jiwoo still worked tirelessly, but there was a lightness in her movements, a sparkle in her eyes he hadn't seen before. She laughed with a customer, a genuine laugh that reached her eyes. The exhaustion was still there, but now it seemed tempered by a new strength, a new hope. Minjun watched her for a long time, feeling the warmth of a satisfaction that money could never buy. He wasn't a savior, but a guardian. And his invisible shield had just given Jiwoo and Junseo a chance to fight. And with each passing day, Minjun felt he was one step closer to fulfilling his silent promise, a promise that was, in some way, connecting him to a life he never imagined possible. The journey would still be long, but now the light of hope shone brighter than ever. Jiwoo woke the next morning with a feeling of lightness she hadn't felt in years. The counselor's words echoed in her mind. The fund will cover everything. She touched Junseo's face, who slept peacefully beside her, and a solitary tear rolled down. It was no longer a tear of despair, but of gratitude. She had a chance. Junseo had a chance. At the Pojangmacha, the news spread like a whisper on the wind. Jiwoo couldn't contain her smile, even as she washed dishes. Regular customers noticed the change. "Miss Park, you look different today," commented an old fisherman. "Yes, sir. Good news," she replied. Her voice choked with emotion. She couldn't give details, but the energy she radiated was contagious. Meanwhile, Minjun and Ms. Choi finalized the details of the next step. "Sir, the land has been officially acquired," Ms. Choi informed him. "Now, about the proposal for Ms. Park. We need an approach that is irresistible but doesn't feel like charity," Minjun said, his eyes fixed on his tablet screen, where a map of the Pojangmacha's neighborhood was open. K Group is initiating an urban revitalization project in certain areas. We want to offer small local businesses the opportunity to relocate their businesses to a modern, fully equipped space with no initial costs. It's a corporate social responsibility initiative. "Understood, sir. A community development facade." Ms. Choi nodded, grasping the subtlety. "Who will make the approach?" "You, Ms. Choi. With your negotiation experience and your ability to deal with people, you are the ideal person. Present yourself as a representative of K Group's urban development team. Emphasize the benefits, a larger, cleaner space with modern infrastructure and the opportunity to expand the business. Make it clear that it's a limited offer for selected businesses that demonstrate potential and a strong connection to the community." Ms. Choi met Jiwoo the following afternoon when the Pojangmacha was less busy. She introduced herself with a discreet business card. "Ms. Park Jiwoo, my name is Choi Mi-yeon. I'm from K Group's urban development team." Jiwoo, surprised by the unexpected visit from someone from such a large company, wiped her hands on her apron. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" "We are mapping successful small businesses in areas that K Group plans to revitalize. Your Pojangmacha is known for its quality and service. We would like to make you a proposal." Ms. Choi explained the revitalization project, describing a new open-air commercial center with modern spaces for small entrepreneurs. "We want to offer Ms. Park one of these new spaces, fully equipped, with no rent for the first 2 years, and with support for marketing and expansion." Jiwoo listened, astonished. Her eyes widened. It was too good to be true. No rent? Fully equipped? Why? Distrust was palpable in her voice. "It's part of our social responsibility initiative, Ms. Park. We believe in the potential of businesses like yours, and we want to support the community." It's an opportunity for you to grow without the initial financial burdens. Your Pojangmacha has a history, a loyal clientele. We want to preserve that essence, but in a better environment. Ms. Choi maintained a professional but warm tone. Jiwoo thought of Jun Seo, the need for a more stable environment, the possibility of having more time for him. A new Pojangmacha meant fewer worries, more security. But the offer seemed almost a miracle, coming right after the fund's approval. Could it be a coincidence? Min Jun, in his dark car a few streets away, observed the scene through a discreet camera installed on a pole. He saw Jiwoo's expression, the mix of hope and skepticism. His heart beat with contained anxiety. He knew he was asking her to trust, to accept an outstretched hand that seemed to come from nowhere. "Think about it, Ms. Park," Ms. Choi concluded, handing her a folder with detailed information. "We have other candidates, but we would very much like you to consider it. It's a chance for a new beginning." Jiwoo held the folder, feeling the weight of possibilities. A new beginning. For her and for Jun Seo. The light of hope, which had just ignited, now shone with an almost blinding intensity, but also with the shadow of uncertainty. She didn't know who was behind all this, but she felt that her destiny was changing in a way she could never have imagined. That night, sleep did not come easily for Jiwoo. The K-Group folder rested on the small bedside table, a strange and powerful object in her humble room. She tossed and turned in bed, her eyes fixed on the dark ceiling as Ms. Choi's words echoed in her mind. No rent for the first 2 years. Fully equipped. Support for marketing and expansion. It was a dream, a fairy tale that seemed to have come from the pages of a book she read to Jun Seo. Jiwoo had never been a fairy tale. She had learned to distrust offers that seemed too good to be true. Life had taught her to fight for every crumb, to be wary of every outstretched hand. Why would K-Group, one of the country's largest corporations, be interested in a simple street Pojangmacha? The explanation of social responsibility seemed hollow, almost an insult to her intelligence. However, the image of Jun Seo, sleeping soundly beside her, was a constant reminder that she couldn't afford to be too skeptical. The fund had approved his treatment, a miracle that still left her breathless. Now, this offer. Was it a coincidence? Or was there an invisible connection, a thin thread linking these unexpected events? She thought of the man she had met on the street, Min Jun, with his sad eyes and his aura of solitude. A brief, almost absurd idea that he might be involved crossed her mind, but she quickly dismissed it. He was just a stranger, a moment of mutual empathy. She got up, picked up the folder, and turned on the small lamp. The plans for the new open-air commercial center were impressive, clean, modern spaces with green areas and inviting lighting. Her Pojangmacha, with its worn tarps and makeshift structure, seemed like a relic of another era in comparison. She imagined Jun Seo visiting her there in a safe and welcoming place, without the smell of smoke or the biting cold of winter. The possibility of having more time for him, of not having to constantly worry about bills, was too tempting to ignore. In the dark car, a few streets away, Min Jun watched the light on in Jiwoo's apartment. He knew she was wrestling with the decision. The image of her, sitting at the Pojangmacha table with the folder in her hands, had been etched in his mind. He could almost feel the storm of thoughts in her head. "Sir, Miss Park is still awake," Mr. Han informed him, his voice soft. "Miss Choi is ready for any contact from her tomorrow." Min Jun nodded, his eyes fixed on the illuminated window. "She is strong, Mr. Han, but she is also cautious. She needs to feel that this is an opportunity, not charity. Ensure that Ms. Choi reinforces the idea that her business is valuable, that the community supports her." He felt a mix of anxiety and deep satisfaction. He was building a future for her, brick by brick, invisibly. It wasn't a matter of control, but of protection. He wanted to see that sparkle in her eyes turn into a constant flame of hope, not just a momentary flash. The next morning, Ji-woo still felt the weight of the decision, but hope had begun to overcome skepticism. She called the number on Ms. Choi's card. "Ms. Choi, this is Park Ji-woo. I would like to accept your offer to visit the new location. And I have some questions." Min Jun received the news of Ji-woo's call with a sigh of relief he didn't even know he was holding. "Excellent, Ms. Choi," he said, his voice firm, but with an almost imperceptible tone of triumph. "Prepare everything, make her feel at home even before she moves in, and make sure she sees the potential, not just for the business, but for her life and Junseo's." The journey was still long, and the challenges had not disappeared. But Ji-woo had taken the first step towards a new beginning, a step that Min Jun, her invisible guardian, had carefully orchestrated. The foundation of hope, which he had promised himself to build, was now more solid than ever, and the love, which he still dared not name, was beginning to blossom in the cracks of both their solitudes. Ms. Choi, with her usual efficiency, scheduled the visit for the afternoon. Ji-woo arrived at the indicated location, a block that once housed old buildings and was now in full transformation. The new open-air commercial center was a sight that took her breath away. Modern wood and glass structures rose, interspersed with small gardens and resting areas. It was a stark contrast to the cramped and weather-exposed Pojangmacha she knew. Ms. Choi awaited her with a warm smile. "Welcome, Ms. Park. This is the future home of your business." They walked down one of the corridors, where some of the spaces were already being occupied by cafes and small shops. The air was clean, the smell of fresh food and coffee gently wafted. Ms. Choi guided her to a corner space, with large windows overlooking an internal plaza. "This is your space, Ms. Park," Ms. Choi announced, opening the door. Ji-woo entered, her eyes wide. The interior was spacious, with high ceilings and abundant natural light. There was a brand-new industrial kitchen with gleaming stainless steel equipment, ample countertops, and a modern exhaust system. Light wood tables and chairs were arranged in an inviting setup. It was everything she could have dreamed of and more. It's incredible," Ji-woo murmured, running her hand over one of the smooth countertops. "But why me? And why would K Group do this? It doesn't make financial sense." Distrust, though diminished by the wonder of the place, still lingered. Miss Choi nodded, understanding her hesitation. "Miss Park, K Group is committed to community development. It's not just about profit. We believe that the success of small businesses like yours is vital to the vitality of a neighborhood. Your Pojangmacha is a landmark, a place where people feel at home. We want to preserve that essence, but in an environment that reflects the quality of your work and the potential for growth." She paused, looking directly at Ji-woo. "Your business has a history, a loyal clientele. We saw that. We are not offering charity, Ms. Park. We are investing in a promising business and in a community we value. We want you to prosper here, for your son to have a safe and comfortable place to visit you, for you to have more time and fewer worries." Ms. Choi's words hit Ji-woo hard. The mention of Junseo, of time and safety, struck a deep chord. She imagined Junseo running through that plaza, sitting at one of those tables, proud of his mother. The image was so vivid, so full of hope, that the last barriers of her skepticism began to crumble. "And the questions I had?" Ji-woo asked, her voice choked. "About the contract, the terms. Everything is in the folder I gave you," Ms. Choi replied with a reassuring smile. "But to summarize, 2 years of zero rent, all equipment included, and continuous support for marketing and management. After 2 years, the rent will be subsidized, well below market value, and you will have the option to purchase the space, if you wish. Our goal is for you to establish yourself and grow without the initial financial pressure. Jiwoo took a deep breath, feeling the weight of possibilities transform into overwhelming relief. It wasn't a dream, it was real, it was a chance she couldn't and wouldn't refuse. In the dark car, a few streets away, Minjun watched the scene through the monitor. He saw Jiwoo smile, a genuine and radiant smile that lit up her face, his heart filled with an emotion he could barely contain. It wasn't just satisfaction that his plan was working, it was something deeper, more tender. "She accepted, sir," Mr. Hun informed him, with a slight smile. Minjun merely nodded, his eyes fixed on Jiwoo's image, who now seemed lighter, more hopeful. He was building a new world for her, one where she could flourish. And in doing so, he felt he was building a new world for himself too, a world where solitude began to give way to the promise of a love not yet declared, but increasingly present. She was about to embark on a new life, unaware that the hand guiding her was the same one that had received her simple dish and kind smile. Jiwoo signed the contract. The pen felt strangely light in her hand, but the weight of the decision was immense. It wasn't just a lease contract. It was a passport to a new life, for her and for Junseo. Ms. Choi congratulated her with a firm handshake and a genuine smile. "Welcome to the K-Group family, Ms. Park. We can't wait to see your success here." In the days that followed, the transition was a whirlwind of emotions and hard work. The K-Group team was incredibly helpful, assisting her in planning the layout, choosing the decor, and even training new employees. Jiwoo, accustomed to doing everything herself, felt strangely at ease with the support. She brought with her the essence of her pojangmatcha, the authentic flavors, the human warmth. But now, in an environment that reflected the dignity and care she always put into her food. The grand opening day arrived. The new restaurant, named Beacon of Hope, was impeccable. The smell of kimchi jjigae and fresh tteokbokki wafted through the air, mingling with the aroma of coffee from neighboring shops. Her old customers, curious and loyal, packed the place, marveling at the transformation. Junseo, now stronger and with his treatment underway, ran through the internal plaza, laughing and waving to his mother through the large glass windows. He seemed like a different boy, free from the worries that once haunted him. That smile on his face was the greatest gift for Jiwoo. He saw Jiwoo, radiant in her new uniform, serving customers with the same grace and kindness as always, but now with a confidence he had never seen. Her eyes shone, no longer with resigned sadness, but with the constant flame of hope. Beacon of Hope was not just the name of the restaurant, it was what she had become. "She is thriving, sir," Mr. Han commented, his voice filled with satisfaction. Minjun merely nodded, a lump in his throat. He had kept his promise. He had built a new world for her, but in doing so, he had discovered that he had also built a new world for himself. The solitude that had accompanied him throughout his life had been replaced by a sense of purpose, of connection. The love, which he had feared to name, now pulsed strongly in his chest, an irresistible force that impelled him to go beyond the role of invisible guardian. He knew it was time. A week later, on a quiet afternoon, Minjun entered Beacon of Hope. He wasn't in his impeccable suit, but in casual, though still elegant, clothes. The restaurant was half full, with the soft hum of conversations and the clinking of dishes. He chose a discreet table near the window, from where he could observe the plaza. Jiwoo was in the kitchen, but soon came out to attend to a table. Her eyes swept the room and suddenly stopped. She saw him, the man she had met on the street, with his sad eyes and aura of solitude, the same man to whom she had offered a simple dish and a kind smile. Time seemed to stand still. Min-jun felt her gaze and looked up. Their eyes met. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a calm expectation. The silence between them was charged with an unspeakable tension, an invisible web of events and emotions that bound them. Ji-woo felt her heart pound. It was him, the man whom, by a brief and absurd idea, she had associated with the miracles happening in her life. The connection she had dismissed as fantasy now seemed an undeniable truth. She approached his table, her voice slightly trembling. "Welcome to Beacon of Hope. What can I serve you?" Min-jun smiled, a gentle smile that reached his eyes. "Anything you recommend, Ms. Park. I'm sure it will be delicious." He paused, his eyes fixed on hers. "It's good to see you thriving." Those words, spoken with such deep sincerity, hit Ji-woo hard. It wasn't a phrase from an ordinary customer. There was something more, a familiarity, a recognition. She felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest, a mix of astonishment and a strange feeling that everything was finally falling into place. "Thank you," she murmured, feeling her cheeks flush. I remember you." "I remember you too, Ms. Park, and your dish of kimchi jjigae. It gave me hope when I needed it most." He extended his hand across the table, a hesitant but firm gesture. "My name is Kim Min-jun." Ji-woo hesitated for a second, then took his hand. The touch was electric, a current that ran through her arm. In that handshake, amidst the restaurant's buzz, past and present united. Min-jun's solitude, Ji-woo's resilience, the challenges overcome, the miracles orchestrated, everything culminated in that moment. She didn't know all the details, not yet, but she felt it. She felt that the hand guiding her, helping her build this new world, was the same one that had received her simple dish and kind smile. And looking into Kim Min-jun's eyes, she saw not only the man who had protected her, but the man who was ready to build a life beside her, a love that transcended money and social position, founded on the purest of hopes. Ji-woo and Min-jun had taken the first step towards a new beginning, a step that they, now together, were ready to tread. The foundation of hope was more solid than ever, and the love which had blossomed in the cracks of both their solitudes was now ready to be named and lived fully.